Thank you, Chair, and it's great to be here again. I was here in December last year when I was the interim Director General, back now permanently appointed. I do consider these sessions to be really important. Is the oral coming over okay? It sounds a bit, yeah, fine. I'm accountable, the NCA is accountable in 4 directions, to the Home Secretary for policing in England and Wales, to the UK Parliament in London for the money we spend, but absolutely also to you for our activity in Northern Ireland, and also to the Scottish Government for what we do in Scotland. So really important that I'm here and that we answer our questions and are accountable. I thought I'd say just a brief word on the change in the serious and organised crime picture as we've seen it over the last year since I was here, the change in strategy that we are implementing following my appointment, and then just a few of the bigger results we've had that have got a Northern Ireland kind of relevance, and then go over to questions if that helps. So on changes to serious and organised crime, I mean, broadly the picture hasn't changed massively. The 2 most significant things that have happened UK-wide in relation to serious and organised crime are actually Russia's invasion of Ukraine back in February and the response that there's been to that, and then the increase in the illegal immigration, largely on small boats coming over the channel. So those have been the 2 biggest operational things that have happened that we are responding to, neither directly as relevant to Northern Ireland as they are to Southern England. But on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we set up a counter-kleptocracy task force to try and deal with that and to pursue any illicit finance from Putin-linked elites or others that was being laundered through or invested into the UK. And that's been an acceleration and intensification of efforts that we've had in place for the last few years since the Salisbury chemical weapon attack. And has been quite successful. We've had 85 disruptions since February, including last week an arrest, as you may have seen in the media, of a wealthy Russian businessman, as we are referring to it in public at the moment, which is significant from our point of view. That does have a broader relevance because one of the things that's happened on the back of those changes is the government in Westminster passing new legislation, one economic crime bill that went through earlier in the year, another one that's before the Commons at the moment, which, and if the latter is passed, will really improve our ability to understand where money is going and go after illicit finance throughout the UK and internationally. So it is stopping money being able to be hidden behind a cloak of anonymity. So that will be beneficial not just for Russian oligarchs, but for organised crime in the round. The second area of change I was going to mention was small boats. We've seen 70,000 people come over into the UK already illegally from over the Dover Straits. That's a significant increase. There is, a real risk to people as they do that, and we saw tragic deaths last year in the Channel when one of the boats overturned. There is organised crime that is facilitating that, and so we are focused, along with a range of partners, both domestically and internationally, on trying to identify and disrupt those organised crime gangs. And we've had some success this year, although the flows continue. Moving on to our strategy, Chair, we are now trying to move the National Crime Agency, and particularly for new members who will have had less to do with the NCA, I mean, we are roughly 6,000 people, a budget of about 800 million, with a remit across the UK, but that absolutely operates internationally as well. We have 3 broad roles that are relevant here. We operationally lead the UK's fight against serious and organised crime, so that is just pulling together all partners, including the PSNI, to make sure we've got a single overall approach that will have the best effect. So that's a governance and planning function. We investigate and disrupt individual bits of criminality ourselves, so we absolutely have our own investigators, intelligence officers. We take cases with the Crown Prosecution Service in England and Wales, PPS here, to court. And then thirdly, we also provide a series of services to police forces, including the PSNI, that can help them in doing their work. So those are the things that we broadly do. In how I'm looking to shift and change the agency, I'm wanting us to get better at the way we do the first of those functions, leading the whole system to make sure we get the very best combined effect out of what we collectively do. And that's just making sure we are better in our intelligence gathering, better in our assessments and our performance management. And then in our operational activity, which is the bulk of where our effort goes, we are moving the organisation more upstream, more overseas, and more online. And that is to follow where the crime is. That's the changes in the crime threat that we are seeing, particularly moving online. The fact that organised crime is very often international. There's very little that is purely based in one country. And it's because of where we think we can have the biggest impact in a way that is not then overlapping, for example, with what Simon and his team are doing in PSNI or other police forces around the country. So that's how we're shifting. I can say more about that in questions if helpful, the strategy of the agency. One thing that might result in terms of my appearances before here, is the disruptions that we are reporting in our reports to you may actually go down, the total number of disruptions. What should not go down is the impact that we are having on the streets of Northern Ireland at all. The impact should go up, but the actual number of minor disruptions that we're recording might go down. So I just mentioned that as a heads up for reports that you may see in the future. But it's absolutely with a design for the impact on the streets of the UK, including Northern Ireland, to be greater. Finally, then, I'll just run through a few results, and we might come back in more detail to CSEA, child sexual abuse. I'm sure you've got questions on that. But one of the big results we've had over the last year was against the Kinahan organised crime group, when we're thinking about drugs and money laundering. That's been a 3-year investigation and operation into one of the biggest organised crime groups operating in Europe, based initially out of Ireland, with the principals moving to Spain and latterly the UAE, but absolutely pumping drugs into the whole of the UK, including Northern Ireland. And where we got to in April, after a lot of effort and joint working with PSNI, but with the Garda, with the Police Nacional and the Guardia Civil in Spain, and with the US Drug Enforcement Agency, was the imposition of financial sanctions by the US, who have the ability to do this, on the organised crime group. So they are slightly beyond our reach at the moment in terms of prosecution, but these financial sanctions can be absolutely debilitating for very significant organised crime groups like the Kinahans. So that has been a major success for us collectively. We arrest and prosecute where we can, and the leader of that, OCG in GB, we arrested and convicted last year, and he said taken 20 years, Tommy Kavanagh. And the main money launderer that supported that group was arrested in Spain, along with his partner, in September. So some really useful and positive operational activity there. I wanted to mention asset recovery as well. It's been a topic of interest for the board, and absolutely is for me as well. So we had our first account freezing order in April in Northern Ireland, now that the Criminal Finances Act is in place here. So that is a really useful step forward for us. It's on a relatively small amount of money, but we think it can have a significant impact on the individual and the criminality we suspect them of being involved in. And we've coupled that with other civil orders that we can have a bankruptcy order in that case, which is for 200,000. So the first time we've done it, and good to kind of cross that line and start doing it. You've had questions before about unexplained wealth orders, which now we are able to use here too. And we have one going through the court process at the moment, so not yet in place, but we have made an application for what would be the first one on someone that is based in Northern Ireland. These are not tools that we use, UWOs are not tools that we use in volume in the rest of the UK either. They are very useful. They're a good tool in our arsenal, but they're quite niche in where we can apply them. So we will use them where they are useful and relevant, and it feels like it will be in this particular case, but not more broadly. And then finally on asset recovery, I mean, a number of other actions we have taken, but particularly useful was a civil recovery order that we got in July this year against an individual with alleged links to the UDA. and that's been on properties of £85,000 and an account with almost £30,000 in it. So we're using these tools in conjunction with the PSNI as aggressively as we can, sensibly, to target criminality, particularly where it's paramilitary linked, as we see it. So that's asset recovery. I'm sure you'll have questions on CSEA, so I could leave that to then. I don't want to take up too much time. I'm happy to talk about fraud. I did want to call out one final point, Chair, if I could, which was some really positive activity that we supported, but which PSNI led recently, and I think was in their report, which was into what we call modern slavery and human trafficking, but in this particular case, sexual exploitation. And that was the raids that PSNI did on 27 brothels around Northern Ireland 2 or 3 weeks ago. Now, which linked to a broader piece of work that we had been doing, identifying particularly Brazilian and Thai women who had been trafficked to the UK and then used in prostitution. So we provided some intelligence support to that activity, but it was absolutely carried out by PSNI, led to 2 arrests and charges, and that's really good to see, because it is one of those crimes that often is not seen as much as it should be or gets the attention that it deserves. So really pleasing to see that. I'll pause there, Chair, and happy to take questions.